Welcome back to AI Analysis. Ready for another deep dive. This one's going to be fascinating, I think. All the links are in the description, of course, if you want to check out the full articles.
We're looking at the Lancet today, issue 10430. It came out on March 9th of this year, 2024.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one. I'm Stanley, by the way.
And I'm Agatha.
So this Lancet issue really zeroes in on women's health, menopause especially.
Yeah, it goes way beyond just the typical hot flashes and stuff.
Okay, good, good. We're all tired of hearing about hot flashes.
I think so. So first up, let's talk about this article, An Empowerment Model for Managing Menopause. Hickey, Davison, and Roberts wrote this one.
Empowerment model. Okay, what's that all about?
Well, they're basically saying, menopause isn't just about your hormones going out of whack. It's about women being in charge of their own health, making their own decisions, really taking the reins.
I like that. So it's more about like taking control and being proactive rather than just being like, oh, well, this is happening to me.
Exactly. It's about, knowing your stuff and feeling confident to handle whatever comes your way.
It's crazy to think how differently people used to view menopause. Like back in the early 1900s, it was this big medical problem. Blamed for everything?
Oh, yeah, they blamed it for everything. Like, oh, the kids are acting up. Must be mom's menopause. It's kind of wild.
The article even mentions how they used to link estrogen deficiency to like alcoholism and divorce and all these societal issues. Can you believe that?
I know, right? And then you had that big HRT scare back in 2002. That really changed things.
Yeah, everyone freaked out when that study linked hormone therapy to a higher risk of breast cancer.
Yeah.
Hormone therapy use plummeted after that.
Yeah, and it's still kind of shaping how doctors approach menopause treatment today. But, even though hormone therapy is becoming more common again, the article's saying it's not a magic bullet.
Right.
It's not just about medication.
It's about the whole picture, taking care of yourself in all these different ways.
Exactly. And remember, menopause, it's not the same for everyone. It can be totally different for different women and in different parts of the world.
And speaking of different, how do you actually know when it's happening? They mentioned that blood tests aren't always accurate for diagnosing menopause, especially for women over 45.
Yeah, those blood tests can be tricky. The best way to know is to pay attention to your cycle. When it starts changing, that's a pretty good sign.
Makes sense.
Okay, so let's talk hot flashes.
Oh, no, not the hot flashes.
I know everyone's tired of hearing about them, but they're a big part of the menopause experience for a lot of women. And, it's not just about those hormones going crazy.
Wait, really? What else is there?
Well, the article says, your mind and your environment, they can actually make those hot flashes worse.
Interesting. So, like, if you're stressed out, it can actually trigger a hot flash.
Yeah, or if you're somewhere that's already hot and stuffy, and then the hot flash itself can make you feel stressed and anxious, so it's like this vicious cycle.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. So managing stress could actually help with those hot flashes.
It definitely can. And, another common issue is sleep problems, but it's not always just the hot flashes keeping you up at night.
What else could it be?
Well, the article mentioned things like sleep apnea. That can definitely disrupt your sleep.
So if you're having trouble sleeping during menopause, don't just assume it's hormones. It could be something else entirely.
Exactly. It's important to get it checked out by a doctor. Don't just suffer it in silence.
Right, right.
Now, those hot flashes, they usually fade away over time, but there are some other symptoms that can stick around, like genitourinary symptoms.
Genitourinary symptoms. What exactly are we talking about here?
Things like vaginal dryness.
That
can really impact a woman's quality of life.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it's probably not something most people feel comfortable talking about.
It's definitely one of those things that people tend to keep to themselves, but it's important to bring it up with your doctor if you're experiencing it.
Right, definitely. It's interesting to think about all the changes that happen during menopause. It's not just physical, right? It's emotional too. And mental.
Absolutely. It's a time of major life transitions for many women. Kids leaving the nest, aging parents, career changes, all that stuff can take a toll.
Yeah, and on top of that, your hormones are fluctuating. It's no wonder so many women experience mood swings and cognitive changes. Speaking of cognitive changes, does that mean menopause makes you lose your mind?
Not at all. You're not going crazy. The article actually says that those memory lapses some women experience are usually temporary.
Phew. That's a relief. So I might forget where I put my keys, but it doesn't mean I'm on the fast track to dementia.
Exactly. So don't worry too much about those little memory slips.
So we've talked about the symptoms and the challenges. What about solutions? What are some of the latest approaches to managing menopause?
Well, non-medication approaches are getting a lot of attention these days.
Like what?
Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is showing a lot of promise.
CBT for menopause. That's a new one for me. I've heard of it for anxiety and depression, but how does it work for menopause?
It's all about, changing your thought patterns and behaviors that might be making your symptoms worse.
Ah,
Studies are showing that it can help with hot flashes, sleep problems, and just your overall quality of life.
so it's about taking a more proactive approach,
Yeah.
managing your mindset and your reactions to those menopausal changes.
Exactly. It's about taking control of your experience.
What about other popular options like acupuncture or herbal supplements? Do those actually work?
The evidence for those is still kind of shaky.
Uh,
While some women might find them helpful, the studies haven't really shown consistent benefits.
so stick with the approaches that have, some real science backing them up. But medication is still an option for many women, right? Especially hormone therapy.
Yeah, hormone therapy can be really helpful for some women, but it's important to weigh the risks and benefits carefully. It's a decision you should make with your doctor, taking into account your individual needs and circumstances.
Personalized medicine. I like it.
Hmm.
What about new treatments? Anything exciting on the horizon?
There's this new treatment called fezolinetant.
Okay, that sounds fancy. What does it do?
It targets a specific pathway in the brain that's involved in those hot flashes.
Oh, interesting.
Studies have shown some improvement in hot flashes with this treatment, but the effects are kind of modest. It's not a miracle cure or anything.
So another tool in the toolkit, but not a silver bullet.
Right. But it's good to have more options available.
The article mentioned that about 13% of women in high-income countries use hormone therapy. And for those with severe symptoms, it can make a big difference in their quality of life.
Yeah, it can really provide significant relief for those struggling with severe hot flashes.
But there are different types of hormone therapy
Absolutely. And choosing the right type is really important.
because they all carry different risks.
Exactly. For example, combined hormone therapy, which includes both estrogen and progestin, has a higher risk of breast cancer than just estrogen-only therapy.
That's good to know. And I've also heard that even the way hormone therapy is delivered can affect the risks.
Yeah, you're right. Transdermal options, like those patches or creams, seem to be safer than taking hormones orally, at least when it comes to blood clot risk.
So lots to consider when making decisions about hormone therapy.
Definitely a conversation to have with your doctor. Now let's shift gears and talk about early menopause.
Okay, so not the typical menopause that happens in a woman's late 40s or early 50s.
Right. This is when menopause happens earlier than expected.
How early are we talking?
Well, this article, Optimizing Health After Early Menopause, by Mishra, Dobson, and Cooley, focuses on menopause that occurs between 40 and 44.
And it's more common than you might think. About 8% of women in high-income countries go through early menopause, and globally it's even higher, around 12%.
Yeah, and then you have premature ovarian insufficiency, where menopause starts even earlier, before age 40.
That affects another 2–4% of women. So combined, we're talking about a significant number of women dealing with this.
And the article points out that both early menopause and premature ovarian insufficiency can increase the risk of some pretty serious health problems down the road, like osteoporosis and heart disease.
So it's not just about the immediate symptoms of menopause, but also the long-term health implications.
Exactly. Being aware of these risks is really important so women can take steps to protect their health.
What kind of steps can women take to manage these risks?
Well, there are lifestyle changes, regular screenings, and sometimes medications that can help.
It sounds like early menopause requires a pretty proactive approach to health management.
It definitely does. And here's something interesting the article brought up. We have specific guidelines for managing premature ovarian insufficiency, but there's not much guidance for early menopause.
That seems like a gap in care, especially considering how many women experience early menopause.
The authors argue that we need to think of early menopause on a spectrum, rather than just using these rigid age cutoffs.
So it's less about your exact age and more about understanding your individual situation and getting the appropriate care no matter what. That makes a lot of sense.
It's about being flexible and meeting women where they are. And let's not forget about the social and emotional impact of early menopause.
Yeah, going through menopause when most of your friends are still, years away from it must be really tough.
The article talks about how women experiencing early menopause often feel isolated and unsupported.
It's like they're going through this major life transition alone.
Exactly. And that can really add to the emotional distress they're already feeling.
So it's not just the physical symptoms, it's the whole emotional and social experience that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. And while the causes of early menopause aren't always clear, there seems to be a strong genetic link.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the research shows that if you have a family history of early menopause, you're 6 to 8 times more likely to experience it yourself.
So if it runs in the family, it's definitely something to be aware of and talk to your doctor about.
Knowledge is power. Now let's switch gears and talk about the emotional side of menopause. There's this article promoting good mental health over the menopause transition. It was written by Brown, Galicchio, and Avis.
This is something I've always wondered about. Is menopause really a time of increased mental health struggles? Like, is it all downhill from there?
Well, it's interesting because the article talks about how, historically, doctors used to link menopause to all these negative psychological states.
So maybe some of that fear and anxiety is just, left over from those old ideas.
Maybe. But it's also important to remember that menopause is a time of hormonal fluctuations, which can definitely affect your mood. The article is careful to distinguish between depressive symptoms, which are common, and major depressive disorder, which is a clinical diagnosis.
So just because you're feeling a little down or irritable during menopause, it doesn't necessarily mean you have clinical depression.
Right. It's important to keep that in mind. But here's the thing. There have been a bunch of studies looking at the link between menopause and depression, and the results are kind of mixed.
Mixed, meaning,
Well, only a couple of those studies actually diagnosed major depressive disorder using clinical interviews.
so it's hard to say for sure what the connection is.
Exactly. We need more research to really understand the relationship between menopause and depression. But one thing that did come out of those studies is that if you don't have a history of major depressive disorder, your risk doesn't seem to go up much during menopause.
That's good to know. So it's not like menopause is this automatic trigger for depression. But they did find some groups of women who might be more vulnerable, right?
They did. Women who are having really bad hot flashes or trouble sleeping, women going through a long menopause transition, and those dealing with major life stressors, they all seem to be at higher risk for depressive symptoms.
So it's not just about hormones. It's about the whole context of a woman's life and how she's coping with everything that's going on.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that everyone's experience is different and providing support that's tailored to each individual's needs.
So what can women do to protect their mental health during menopause?
Well, the article stresses the importance of managing stress, getting enough sleep, and having good social support.
Basic self-care, but so important.
It really is. And it's also crucial to get help if you're struggling with your mental health. Don't just brush it off and assume it's all because of menopause.
Because it could be something else entirely, right?
Yeah, it's important to get a proper diagnosis and treatment if you need it. Don't let menopause become an excuse to ignore your mental health.
Okay, let's move on to a completely different topic. This article, Called to End Sponsorship from Commercial Milk Formula by McNabb, Rollins, and Baker, tackles a really important ethical issue.
It's about healthcare professional associations, or HCPAs, accepting money from formula companies.
Wait, healthcare organizations taking money from formula companies? That doesn't sound right.
Yeah, and the article makes a strong case against it. They say it creates a conflict of interest that could really impact the advice healthcare professionals give to new mothers.
So instead of getting unbiased information, new moms might be getting information that's slanted to favor formula over breastfeeding.
Exactly. And the article argues that this is a big problem because HCPAs are supposed to be promoting the best possible infant feeding practices, which usually means breastfeeding.
Right, and formula companies have a financial incentive to sell more formula, so their goals aren't exactly aligned.
The article actually quotes the authors as saying, "Aggressive marketing of breast milk substitutes threatens our capacity to deliver quality care." They're basically saying these sponsorships compromise the ability of healthcare professionals to provide the best possible care.
This is like a clash of values, right? The health of mothers and babies versus corporate profits.
Exactly. And the article calls for HCPAs to stop accepting these sponsorships by the end of next year, 2024.
That's a bold move. I'm curious to see if they'll actually follow through.
Me too.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to watch how this unfolds.
Okay, let's shift gears to another really important but sensitive topic. Conflict-related sexual violence. This article, Conflict-Related Sexual Violence Time to Stop Hamas, by researchers from Bar-Ilan University, dives into this horrific reality.
It's a tough topic, but we can't just ignore it. Sexual violence is a tactic of war that has been used for far too long.
The article focuses specifically on the Hamas invasion of Israel that happened last year in October 2023.
It's heartbreaking. As of February 29th of this year, 134 hostages, including 19 women and children, were still being held captive by Hamas, and there are reports that some of them have been subjected to sexual violence.
That's just horrific, those poor people.
The article is a call to action, really. It's urging medical societies and human rights organizations to speak out against these atrocities.
It's about holding those responsible accountable and demanding the release of those hostages.
Exactly. And the article also criticizes the global community's response to this situation. The authors are particularly critical of UN Women for their delayed condemnation. They're saying there's a double standard in how women's rights violations are addressed in different conflicts.
That's a really disturbing thought. It shouldn't matter where it's happening or who's involved. Sexual violence is a human rights violation, period.
Absolutely. And we need to do more to ensure the protection of women and children during conflict.
Okay, let's move on to a global health crisis that often gets overlooked. Snakebite envenoming. This article, Strengthening Global Snakebite Data for WHO's Goal for 2030, sheds light on this often neglected issue.
It's a bigger problem than most people realize. We're talking about an estimated 4.5 to 5.4 million snake bites and 81,000 to 130,000 deaths every year.
Whoa, those are huge numbers. I had no idea it was that widespread. Where are most of these snake bites happening?
Primarily in low and middle income countries.
So it's another example of the health disparities that exist around the world.
Exactly. And the article emphasizes how important it is to have accurate data on snake bites. They say underreporting is a big problem, especially in countries like India, and that it's hindering efforts to manage this issue effectively.
If we don't even know the true extent of the problem, how can we address it?
That's exactly the point they're making. We need better data collection to understand where snake bites are happening, how many people are affected, and what kind of resources are needed.
So it's not just about the venom itself, it's about having the right systems in place to prevent and treat snake bites.
Right. And the good news is that the World Health Organization has recognized snakebite envenoming as a neglected tropical disease.
So there's some movement in the right direction.
They're urging countries to step up their surveillance and treatment programs. It's a start.
Okay, let's circle back to menopause. This last article we're discussing, Managing Menopause After Cancer, by Hickey, Davison, and Roberts, focuses on the unique challenges faced by women who go through menopause as a result of cancer treatment.
It's a really important topic because there are more and more women surviving cancer these days, but many of them are dealing with the long-term effects of treatment, including early menopause.
So on top of everything else they've been through, they have to deal with all the physical and emotional changes of menopause.
It's a lot to handle, and the article highlights just how difficult it can be to manage menopause symptoms in this context.
I imagine it gets pretty complicated, especially because of the potential interactions between menopause treatments and cancer treatments.
Exactly. It's a delicate balancing act, and unfortunately, the article points out that access to effective treatments for menopause after cancer is often limited, even in developed countries.
So even if there are treatments available, not everyone can get them.
The article goes on to discuss the complexities of using hormone therapy after cancer. They say it's generally not recommended for women who've had breast cancer because of concerns about recurrence risk.
So if hormone therapy isn't an option, what can these women do?
Well, there's some promising research emerging on non-hormonal treatments for managing menopause symptoms.
That's good news.
Yeah, it's giving women more options.
It sounds like managing menopause after cancer requires a very individualized approach.
It absolutely does. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. It often involves a team of healthcare providers working together to create a plan that takes into account the woman's medical history, her cancer treatment, and her individual symptoms and needs.
It's about treating the whole person, not just the disease.
Exactly. And the article stresses the importance of addressing both the physical and the emotional aspects of this experience. They even share a case study about a 37-year-old woman who went through early menopause because of ovarian cancer treatment.
I remember that case study. It was really powerful. She talked about all the challenges she faced, like hot flashes, vaginal dryness, anxiety, depression.
It was a really honest and raw account of what it's like to go through this.
It's a reminder that we need to go beyond just the medical aspects and provide support that addresses the whole person. So what can be done to better support women experiencing menopause after cancer?
The article calls for more multidisciplinary care, where different specialists like oncologists, gynecologists, and mental health professionals work together to provide comprehensive care.
So it's about having a team of experts who can address all aspects of a woman's health and well-being.
Exactly. And they also call for better access to information that's specifically tailored for cancer survivors. Information that addresses their unique needs and challenges.
Because what they need to know is going to be different from what a woman going through natural menopause needs to know.
Exactly.
It's about empowering them to make informed decisions about their health and their future.
Absolutely.
Well, this deep dive has been incredibly informative. We've covered so much ground. The physical and emotional aspects of menopause, the unique challenges of menopause after cancer, the global health crisis of snakebite envenoming.
And let's not forget those important ethical considerations surrounding industry influence on infant feeding practices and the urgent need to address conflict-related sexual violence.
There's been a lot to take in, but I think it highlights just how complex and interconnected women's health issues are.
It really does.
And while it can feel overwhelming at times, I think it's important to remember that we can all make a difference. Even small actions can have a ripple effect.
Absolutely. Whether it's educating ourselves, talking to our friends and family, supporting organizations doing great work in these areas, or simply being more mindful of the language we use, we can all contribute to creating a more supportive and equitable world for women.
So to our listeners, we encourage you to keep learning, keep talking, keep challenging the status quo, and keep advocating for better healthcare for all women.
That's a great message to end on. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the Lancet, and we'll see you next time.